Cassandra Vale hurried along the paved street. Cold rain stung her face and she blinked it out of her eyes. It was getting late and already dark, and she was worried she was lost. This part of Milan didn't look the way she'd expected it to. She ended up in one of the main shopping quarters. Shoppers wrapped in dark, stylish coats and holding carrier bags thronged the wide sidewalk. Cassie glanced into the stalls as she headed towards the crossroads, wondering if she could ask for directions inside. The brightly lit interiors were oases of comfort and warmth, but in her shabby jacket and wet trainers, she doubted she'd be allowed past the door. These names represented the pinnacle of the fashion industry: Emilio Pucci, Dolce & Gabbana, Moschino. The garments themselves seemed as far out of reach as their price tags. She would just have to rely on her map, which was rapidly disintegrating in the rain. She stopped at the crossroads to unfold it, realizing that her lips and cheeks felt numb. The damp paper tore as she opened it, and she pressed the ripped pieces together, trying to make sense of the complex pattern of streets with the unfamiliar and by now mostly unreadable names. She'd come too far. She should have turned 4 blocks ago. Disoriented in the strange place, she hadn't stopped to check her bearings. Her hands were shaking as she turned the map, trying to puzzle her way back to where she needed to be. A left turn here, 3 blocks down. No, 5. And then another left turn that led into a twisting labyrinth of roads. That was where she needed to be. Cassie folded the pieces as best she could and put them back in her pocket, even though she knew the map wouldn't survive another outing. She had to concentrate now and suppress the panic that she would be too late and that the place she needed would have closed by the time she got there. Or, worse still, that her journey would end in nothing more than hopeless disappointment. This was her only chance to find her sister Jackie. It was the only lead she had. Struggling to keep the picture of the route in her mind, she half ran down the streets, noticing that as she left Milan's fashion epicenter behind, the walkways became narrower and the shop fronts less imposing. This was where the cheaper items and knockoffs were displayed, the euro prices dropping with every block and January sale notices screaming from the shabby windows. She caught sight of herself in the darkened glass. Her skin was winter pale, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She'd pulled a lime-green beanie over her shoulder-length auburn hair, mostly for warmth, but also to keep the rebellious waves under control. Huddled in the old blue coat with its broken zipper, she looked out of place in this stylish fashion capital. She felt like an outsider among the immaculately dressed locals, with their perfectly groomed hair and expensive boots and natural sense of style. When she and Jackie were young, they had often been forced to wear worn, torn, ill-fitting clothes to school, with their widowed father angrily insisting that there was no money to buy them anything better. Cassie had accepted her lot more readily than Jackie, who had hated looking shabby and poor. It made sense that her sister would have been drawn to one of the world's fashion capitals, where every piece of clothing was trendy, beautiful, and new. Gasping for breath, Cassie saw the street name ahead looked familiar. This was the road she wanted. Now all she had to do was find the shop. It was called Cartoleria, but she didn't know if that was the actual name or the description. There had been a language barrier when speaking to the clerk on the phone. Cassie had managed to obtain the road name from the increasingly impatient woman, even though the only English she had known were the words, "We are closing," which she had repeated several times before finally snapping out, "Adio," and slamming the phone down. Cassie had decided the only way to find out would be to visit the store personally. It had taken her a week to get organised and to drive the whole way from Edinburgh, where she'd been staying, to Milan. She'd planned to arrive much earlier and had been stuck in traffic coming into the city and had lost her way several times before finding a cheap place to park. Her GPS had malfunctioned and her phone's battery was almost dead. Thankfully, she'd thought to print the map out earlier. What time did most places close here? 6 p.m? Later? Anxiety surged inside her as she saw the store ahead of her was already closing up for the day, the storekeeper turning the sign on the door and switching off the lights. "Excuse me, Cartoleria, do you know which way it is?" she asked him, anxious that every second counted. He frowned at her, and then pointed down the road and said something in Italian that she didn't understand.